And welcome back to Focal Point AFR Talk. Well, if follow the money is the theme, John Kerry out there today saying, hey, the Arab nations will pay for the whole thing. As long as they don't have to die, as long as we're willing to send our people in there to die for their cause, they're willing to pay for the whole thing. He says that offer is on the table. Another story here, going back to the theme we addressed in the first hour, about how everywhere we go, we endanger the safety of Christians. Happening again. A story here out of Al-Qaeda going after a Christian village in a heavily populated area in Syria. So it's a densely populated area. It's a Christian mountain village. So they're singling out this Christian village for attack. Those are the people, ladies and gentlemen, John McCain wants us to support. Those are the people that Barack Obama wants us to strengthen. This is the opposition he's talking about. He wants to strengthen them. He wants to get arms in their hands so they can use them against other Christians. I mean, that's how they're using them. I'm not saying he's doing it for that purpose, but that's how they're being used, and it's foolish not to recognize that. And apparently the resolution would actually authorize President Obama to put boots on the ground. Here's a story from the Washington Times. Senators on Wednesday tried to write a tight resolution authorizing President Obama to strike Syria under very specific circumstances, but analysts and lawmakers said the language still has plenty of holes the White House could use to expand military action well beyond what Congress appears to intend. Wiggle room, there's plenty of that, said Louis Fisher, a scholar in residence at the Constitution Project. So it's written loosely enough that if it's approved, he would have a way to put boots on the ground. And then we got a story here posted on National Review Online that calls, this is Representative Matt Salmon, but calls against going into Syria are running 498-2. He said, look, my office has gotten 500 calls about Syria. Only 2 of the callers want us to go into Syria. And he says, look, this is not hyperbole. I am not exaggerating this. It's 498-2. And apparently, again, according to a story on the Washington Times, not even liberals are convinced that this is what they ought to do. President Obama's liberal activist base is adamantly opposed to military strikes in Syria, according to a new survey the Progressive Change Campaign Committee released on Wednesday. 73% of the liberals that they polled are opposed to the U.S. taking action in Syria. Just 18% support the strike. So once again, President Obama governing against the will of the people. Let's grab clip number 8. This is Democrat Representative Zoe Lofgren. She's talking about Syria, and she's on board with Madison and Hamilton and Washington and Andy McCarthy and yours truly. President's got to get authorization from Congress. Let's listen.
What Secretary of State John Kerry had to say today, and the president, did anything that you heard from them sway your mind, change anything about your thinking?
Well, I guess here's the question. Nobody is arguing that the use of chemical weapons is right or moral. It's appalling. So that's really not the point. The point is, what should the United States do? Should we engage in an act of war? And in order for that to occur, the law is very clear. It's not a decision the president gets to make on his own. It's a decision made by the full American government, the Congress with the president, and to do otherwise would violate the law, but it would also be a mistake in terms of the political culture of our country. The American people are not for this right now.
So that's Zoe Lofgren, arch liberal from California. She refers to the law, but she's really referring to the Constitution. It's not a decision the president gets to make on his own. Here's Eleanor Holmes Norton, clip number 9. She's represents Washington, D.C. in Congress, and she explains the only reason she would wind up voting for President Obama's resolution. Let's listen.
If, as you said, if the vote were held today, the president would probably not win it. If he doesn't win it a week from now, do you think the president would be justified in taking action on his own, unilaterally with Congress having voted against it?
No, oh boy, no. I think it'll be like the red line trap. He said if it's a red line, you'll cross it. I think once you say I'm going to Congress, you can't say, okay, I'm going to do it anyway.
Yeah, I don't care.
I think he'll be in real trouble if he then does it anyway. No president has done that.
It's not an easy decision for any of you, Congresswoman Eleanor Holmes Norton.
Oh, and I should say, Bill, that if he gets saved at all, I think it'll be because of loyalty of Democrats. They just don't want to see him shamed and humiliated.
So she says, look, the only reason that Democrats would vote for this thing is because they don't want to see President Obama ashamed or humiliated. They would simply do it out of loyalty to President Obama. Now, one last clip before we go to the phones, 888-589-8840. This is Senator John McCain, and this is just craziness. I mean, the phrase Allahu Akhbar, this phrase goes back to Muhammad. It's the war cry of the Muslims. You know, like the Indian nations, when the cowboys and Indians, and they would have their war cries, their war whoops, this is their war cry. You had the rebel yell. That was their war cry. This is the war cry of Muslims, and it goes all the way back to Muhammad, to the days of Muhammad, to the time of Muhammad. He was the first one to use the phrase Allahu Akhbar before they attacked a bunch of Jews back in some village in Saudi Arabia. So listen to John McCain. I mean, you wonder whether this guy is clued in at all. Let's listen.
I know you met with General Idris, who is a defector from the Syrian army, who's come out. Some say that he does have tie to Muslim extremists. I don't know. Well, listen to this video, Senator McCain, of a Syrian, it looks like a fighter jet being shot out of the sky. Listen to what they say afterwards. Allahu Akhbar! Allahu Akbar! I have a problem helping those people out if they're screaming that after a hit.
Would you have a problem with American and Christians saying thank God, thank God? That's what they're saying. Come on. Of course they are Muslims, but they are moderates, and I guarantee you that they are moderates. I know them and I've been with them. For someone to say Allah Akbar is about as offensive as someone saying thank God.
Well, poor John McCain, I mean, he's absolutely clueless. If he thinks there are any moderates anywhere in Syria that are part of the opposition here, he's either completely deluded and self-deceived, which is sad, or he is deliberately telling a lie, which is even worse. But there's no way there are any moderates that are part of the opposition here. This is a piece on the history of the phrase Allahu Akbar, founded on pjmedia.com by Andrew Bostom, who's a real scholar on Islam. Allahu Akbar has been employed by Muslims as a jihadist war cry dating from its declaration by Islam's prophet Muhammad when he made an aggressive proto-jihadist foray on the Jews of the Khaybar Oasis. So the Jews come out with their bags and their spades in the morning. When they saw the prophet, they said, Muhammad and his army. The prophet said, Allahu Akbar, and Khaybar is ruined. For whenever we approach a nation, an enemy to fight, and it will be a miserable morning for those who have been warned. So Allahu Akbar, and John McCain, I mean, thank God, is not the war cry of Christians. That's what we say before we sit down and eat. That's what Allahu Akbar is, what they say before they cut our heads off, before they blow us up. And it's just... I mean, it's hard to believe that John McCain does not understand that. Well, let's go to the phones. Let's go to Daniel, Palestine, Texas. Daniel, welcome to Focal Point with Brian Fisher. What's on your mind? Number, by the way, 888-589-8840.
Well, Brian, I'm just a first-time caller, listen to your show a lot. And
Thank you.
I find it very interesting, and I'd like to say I think you take it on the chin quite a bit. You take it really good. I had a couple of questions I'd like to ask, and it deals more with prophecy. And then please correct me if I'm kind of off out in left field on this. But I do believe that Russia and China are basically backing Syria, correct?
Say that again.
Is Russia and China kind of backing Syria right now?
I don't know about China, but Russia and Iran are definitely backing. They're backing Assad. In fact, I got a story here about the Syrians are taking some of their stuff. If I can grab that story here from Washington Times, Syria's military is preparing for a U.S. strike by dispersing its forces into apartment buildings, schools, and mosques, and may be hiding its most valuable assets inside a Russian naval base, betting that U.S. missiles will avoid it. So the Syrians are out there and they're moving their troops, their rocket launchers, their artillery, and other heavy weapons into residential neighborhoods so that if we go in there and attack them, we're going to take out civilians. I mean, this is what they do. They use human shields. The other place they're hiding them is in a Russian naval base because they don't think we're going to attack a Russian naval base. That would be an act of war. Anyway, go ahead.
Right. Okay. Well, with all that in mind, and again, I don't want to be way off base, but how would that kind of relate to the Battle of Gog and Magog?
Well, it's interesting. You look at, the words of prophecy from Ezekiel 38, 39. There's a question about, what those apply to in prophetic terms, whether that is a future event. But if it is, if that prophecy has not already been fulfilled, you've got all of the players really that are pictured in those prophetic passages of Scripture in the Old Testament. All those players, they're sort of on the battlefield now. I mean, you look at Turkey, which is probably a reference to Garma. You've got Gog and Magog that may be a reference to Russia. And they're all, Russia is beefing up. I mean, they're sending military warships into the region. I mean, they're bulking up their military presence right there. So you got Israel, obviously, they've got enormous concerns in this circumstance. They share a border with Syria, so this represents a severe, a very serious threat to their integrity and their security. So, again, I don't know how all those prophetic things line up, whether this is the time. I mean, every generation, Daniel, since the first has thought that we were living in the last times. So someday one of those generations is going to be right, could be ours. Who knows? Anyway, last word. I got about 20 seconds. Anything else you want to add, Daniel? Okay. Well, listen, I appreciate that call, Daniel. We'll let you go. We're running out of time here. But it is a fascinating set of events from a prophetic standpoint because, a lot of those prophecies that many Christians today look at as future, I think, have already been fulfilled in the past. But if some of those have yet to be fulfilled, interesting possibilities. Focal Point, AFR Talk.